Hello and welcome to the Sentinel Visualizer training session. Today we're going to concentrate on data import. So as a quick review, you'll recall that Sentinel Visualizer is used to discover connections, relationships, and patterns within sets of data. By the way, any data that I'm showing today is either scrambled or publicly available. So I'm not showing anything secret or private to you. So before we get into the data import, just as an example, these are transactions. Each row represents an event. And then we had different columns of data. Long story short, which we will get into in a moment, we use the import wizard to bring that spreadsheet into Sentinel Visualizer. Then we can click the All Data to Visualizer button, which basically says, show me everything in the database. This is a visualization of that spreadsheet. So if we were to zoom in using the navigator on the right side, you'll see these different tabs here on the right side. The tab at the bottom is navigator. If I draw a box inside the navigator, it zooms me into that section of the chart. If I grab the edge of the navigator, I can zoom around the chart and go to different areas of the chart. But if we zoom in here, we take a look at this guy Mark, I can right click, I can drill down to his record, what we call an entity. Within the entity, we have the brief tab, documents, metadata, notes. Basically, we have a database and you can fill in the database with all of your data. The brief tab is free format data for text from a newspaper article or maybe a report someone submitted. You can attach documents and videos. Metadata we'll talk about is used for searching and filtering and notes. But the point is, when you go into your database and you find that person, place, or thing, it could be a bank account, it could be a phone number, it could be the name of a gang or a company, you can then visualize, in this case, his 1-degree connections to stores and transactions. Then your data would be different. Again, in this case, it happens to be stores and transactions. Your data may be bank accounts or crimes or something like that. Anyway, if we take one of these stores and we expand, we can start to see these other connections, these other relationships. And what we find if we redraw this, let's redraw it one more time. We see this area right here. I'll zoom in. This area right here is our zone of interest. This is where the action is happening. This guy Brian and this guy Mark, they are hitting these stores. So as an investigator, I've identified my zone of interest. The point is, it would have been pretty difficult to figure out those connections from this set of raw data, but by visualizing it, we can quickly discover connections, relationships, and patterns. We'll go for another minute just to show you one or two more things, and then we'll get into the import. You might have noticed that my spreadsheet had location-specific data. If you have location data, you can send it out to Google Earth. This is where all the stores are located, and each transaction had a date stamp, so we can see how the suspects travel from store to store over time. Back in Sentinel Visualizer, we also have not only a time range tool where we can see how the network shrinks over time, or how the network grows over time. And then we have a tab here where you can say, well, just show me linked accounts. But we also have a timeline here, which is a textual view of the timeline. We also have built-in maps here as well. And then last but not least, the social network analysis, where you can evaluate the data based on different metrics, not just quantity, but also quality. All right, so that's Sentinel Visualizer in a nutshell. Now let's take a look at the data import. I'm going to close this spreadsheet here. So we have two spreadsheets that we're looking at. We have a set of telephone call records. Column A called column B on date C. This is a small set of data. It's only 45 rows. It's just for illustrative purposes. And this could just as easily be this bank account sent money to this bank account, or this person worked for this company. It's not as much the contents within the cell, although that is important. It's also the concept of connecting columns. So we want to see which phone number is calling which other phone number. So we're going to connect column A and B. Then we have a second set of data, which is in effect a phone book. In this case, the owner of the phone, we want to see who owns the phone. Now, you will notice that there is one common column. A phone number column here matches either or both of these columns here. So that's how we're going to link the sheets together. Again, link analysis. It doesn't really matter in which order you import the two sets of data, but we're going to start with the phone book. We're going to import this first, just as it's a little bit more illustrative. All right, the first thing we're going to do is create a new database. So my databases is your local hard drive C. If you're a single user, if you're working as a single user and not collaborating with other users, then the database will be on your local hard drive, typically drive C. This is using Microsoft SQL Express from the FMS ASG website, the download site. So just like you'd put a Word doc on drive C or an Excel spreadsheet on drive C, Sentinel Visualizer's database resides on drive C when you're a single user. So that is my databases. However, if you want to collaborate with other users, simultaneous multi-user collaboration, then the database must reside on a shared Microsoft SQL Server and or Microsoft Azure SQL Cloud account, or similar. It could be AWS, could be GoDaddy, but you do need Microsoft SQL Server. All right, and so if the database is on the server, you would enter your server credentials here in the server name, and then the database would reside on that central location, and everyone with a Sentinel Visualizer license could collaborate in that project. But on this, I'm just on my notebook, my laptop machine, and so we'll just go ahead and we'll just call this database 1. So you would name the database. It could be the project name. It could be a generic name, whatever you want to call it. Now notice I am using an underscore. SQL Server does not allow a white space. So you could either make it one name or I use an underscore. So we'll just call this database 1. And we'll hit OK. And this is creating a Microsoft SQL Server database on my computer. Just give it a second here. We'll hit OK. Notice in the lower right, I'm in a database called Database 1. So you always want to make sure that you're in that database, and I'll show you why in a moment. But also notice these are grayed out because there's no data in this database. It's a brand new database. Now, every database comes with these entity types. So what is an entity type? An entity is a noun, a person, place, or thing. It could be a bank account. It could be a company. So every database, every time you create a database, comes with these entity types. You can customize your database by hitting add, putting in the name of the new of the new entity type, choosing an icon. Now, we give you 9,500 icons, so we can customize this database. And so you can see I have a new entity type. And just real quickly, also with relationship type, the system comes with all of these relationship types. Relationship types are verbs. Committed a crime, married, sent to. So again, you can customize your database with your own relationship types, but every time you create a new database, the system comes with these. The third main area are metadata types. Adjectives. Metadata are adjectives: eye color, alias name, birth date for a person, maybe an industry for a company, perhaps checking or savings if it's a bank account. But again, every new database comes with these metadata types. And again, you can customize your own. All right. Before I get to import, we want to import these call records. You can also drag and drop. If I open a new visualizer, you don't always have to import from a spreadsheet. You might have been watching a TV show or heard something on the radio or read a newspaper article or somebody told you something. You can click your Add Items button. Again, we're over to these tabs over on the right. Add items, which is all our icons, what we call entity types. Remember, these are your nouns, your person, place, or thing. So if I wanted to visualize a bank account sending money to another bank account, I might drag and drop the bank account icon, and maybe this is Bank of Nepal, and you say, bank account 123456, and then maybe they sent it to another bank account at Bank of Nepal, but this is bank account 987654. Then you would click this button, Draw Relationship. So notice when I turn it off and I rest my cursor, it remains an arrow. But if I check this box, it turns to a hand, at which point I can connect these two entities. And when I right-click on the relationship type, it defaults to the first one. When I right-click on relationship type, I can then choose all of or any of my relationship types. And so here I say this account sent money to that account. And then I can turn off Draw Relationships. Now notice the asterisk. This is not saved. I'm working in RAM. If my computer were to crash right now, I would lose this data. So you want to make sure that you save it. Now, I have the choice. I can save the actual chart. If I want to say the name of the chart, if I want to save that. Or I don't have to save that, but I at least want to save the items to the database. 99% of the time. Sure, sometimes you might just want to work in RAM and maybe you're not ready to save it to the database. You can turn that off, but 99% of the time you're going to save it. And so you hit OK. And now I've saved that data to the database. I will not lose it. I can also either double click or right click, and I can drill down to that entity, at which point I can hit edit, and then I can add data to any of these tabs. Again, you're getting back into the database where you can enter data against this account. But my main point was that I dragged and dropped. I did not import the data, but I just did it by hand. Okay. Now we want to go back and we want to import this spreadsheet. So let's see how we do that. We're going to go to the import wizard. Now, these entity one, this is if you want to just import one column as an entity, without any connections, a standalone entity. It could be a list of bank accounts, it could be a list of people, it could be a list of companies. Maybe you're just bringing it into your database and you're not creating any relationships. You can do that. Two entities. This is if you want to bring in two columns and one relationship. This is if you want to bring in three columns. maybe a phone to a phone to a person, or a bank account to a bank account to another bank account. This is also after you create an import map. You can open a saved one, but we're going to start with a new one. Again, these are kind of pre-drawn for you, pre-created, but I want you to learn where it comes from. So we're going to start with a new palette, a new template, a blank palette. So your first step is to retrieve your source data. Is your data in Excel? Is it in Access? Is it in SQL Server? Or is it in a CSV file, a text delimited file? In this case, it's in Excel. So we're going to go and we're going to go to that directory. So I'm just going to grab that directory. We're going to source data, Excel. I'm going to find that folder. And again, it doesn't matter in which order you bring the data, you're still going to get the same result. I'm going to do the phone book first because it's a little bit more illustrative. And we give you a preview here. Notice it reflects the columns in the spreadsheet. And if you have multiple worksheets, you can choose them here. We're going to get back into the where clause in a moment, not yet. I'm just going to hit OK. So notice source data from type of phone, owner, address, title corresponds with the columns in the spreadsheet. Well, what is it I want to find out? What is it I want to visualize? I want to see the people and the phones that they own. I'm going to connect column A and C. So I'm going to add an entity, and I'm going to connect column A and C. It doesn't matter in which order you do it. I'm just going to start with column C, and I'm going to connect the dots. I'm going to connect the dots right here. It connects that, and I'm going to tell the Sentinel Visualizer what kind of entity type it is. In this case, it's a person. Now, a good habit to get into is to label this box. Now, I like to label it with the column letter, but that's just me. Some people like to say owner of the phone. Some people like to say target. Some people like to say whatever you want to type. This is just cosmetic. It's just a label. It's for the human, not Sentinel Visualizer. It's just a label. Now I'm going to add another entity, and I'm going to connect column A, and this time it's a phone number, and again, it's a good habit to get into to label the entity. By the way, if you need more real estate, just click this thumbtack up there and it'll make that menu disappear. If you rest your cursor over, it'll pop back out, and you can hit the thumbtack again if you'd like. All right, so we have two entities, two columns. How do we connect a person and a phone? How do we connect two entities? How do we connect column C and column A? Through a relationship. By the way, your user interface will be slightly different. This is a new build. We are issuing a new build very soon. Your user interface might be different than that. Now, if I want to zoom back in, I do a control mouse wheel. I hold the control key down on my keyboard and I spin the mouse wheel, and I can zoom in or out. So now I want to connect the person to the phone. So we're going to connect it to the relationship. I'm going to take the right side of the person and connect it to the left side of the relationship from. This will indicate the direction of the arrow. The relationship arrow will point to the two. So I want to connect from the person to the phone number. What kind of relationship has or owns the phone? In other words, this person has or owns this phone. And this is my C to A relationship. Now, even though I might not be done, I want to save this map. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going, notice it's an SVI-X file, a Sentinel Visualizer import version 10, Roman numeral 10. So this is my owners to phone. You can call it whatever you want. You can call this file whatever you want. It is an external file and you can use it over and over again. I'll just go ahead and replace the existing one. Now, at this point I could hit import and I'm good to go. But there is one other thing I want to show you. Notice we have other columns, type of phone, title. In this case, these are what's called metadata, because they kind of sit behind the scene. They describe the phone. The address and the title describe the person. So if you want to import it, you don't have to import it, but if you want to import the columns as metadata, and by the way, any column, or rather every column, can be used as an entity and or a relationship type and or metadata, but only entities are linked. In other words, metadata sits behind the scene for filtering and searching, although you can display it on the chart. But for linking, it's entities. All right. I want to add the type of phone because I want to maybe filter by just mobile phones or landlines. By the way, if your data is like bank accounts, perhaps it's checking account or savings account or some other kind of bank account, money market or something. The point is you can filter and search your database by that metadata at that granular level. So if you want to add metadata to the phone number, just click this button, add metadata. We're going to click type of phone, we're going to drag and drop again, connect the dots, and then we tell Sentinel Visualizer what type of metadata it is. We're going to call it type of phone. And just so we can do a little bit more, let's also add some metadata to the person. Let's say title. All right, now I haven't saved, and so it's a good idea, good habit to get into to save, and I'm going to save my import map. Because remember, you can use this map over and over again. You have to draw it only the first time. Now at this point we can hit import, and I'm going to do that in a moment. There are some other things you can do up here, such as import settings. Now I don't have dates and times in this spreadsheet. So we'll come back to this, but if your Windows date and time do not match your source data, in other words, your Windows date and time might be different than your source data date and time, you can match it up here, but we'll come back to that. And there are some other things here. I didn't want to dwell on it too much. At this point, let's hit import. Now, you see make checkpoint. It's pretty much a good idea to leave this checked, because what it does, it backs up your database prior to import, so that when, not if, when you make a mistake, I still make mistakes. I've been here 13 years and I still make mistakes. You will make mistakes. This backs up the database so that you can go back in time, restore your database, fix your import, and then re-import your data. So it's a good idea to leave this on. It's just an insurance policy. We'll go ahead and hit OK. It only took a second or so. We're going to hit our home page and we're going to hit all data to Visualizer. This is what that spreadsheet looks like when visualized. Now remember, I had drawn in the database my bank accounts. So really it overlaid or added to the database. Now for these purposes, I'm just going to get rid of that temporarily. I did not delete that from the database. I deleted it only from the chart. But here you can see who owns the phone. Now, because I brought the metadata in, the type of phone, just as an example, if I wanted to filter, I could go to my entities, data refinement, click this ellipsis, go to my metadata and say, I'm interested only in, for example, mobile phones. And when I enable that filter, it gets rid of the noise. It decluttered. So these are declutter tools to get rid of the noise. Now this is a small chart and it's easy to see, but you may have thousands of entities on the chart. So you're going to use all of these data refinement filters to get rid of the noise and hone in on the data that you need. Okay, so that is our phone book. But now we have these call records. What happens if I overlaid these telephone call records on top of the phone book? Well, let's take a look. All right, so at this point, let's go back to the import wizard because I'm going to import a second set of data on top of the first set of data. Now, in this particular case, I know that I want to connect column A and B. So that's two entities. So I could choose two entities in a relationship and it would be halfway there. I could choose my entity types. I could say phone number like that. Or I can open a saved import because I know that I've already done this. So not only to save some time, but also to illustrate this function, I'm going to open a saved import file. And so it actually thinks I want to open the one I just saved, but I don't. I want to browse, I want to find a new one, and this time I'm going to open my existing one. Remember how I saved the one that I hand drew? Well, instead of drawing this new one from scratch, I'm going to open a saved one. It just saves me some time. So, for example, if you're always getting data from T-Mobile or AT&T or Sprint or whatever your popular telephone service is, you can set up an SVIX file for that template. So you would have an AT&T template, you'd have a Sprint template, and you wouldn't have to draw it every time. All right, anyway, I'm opening this template and it's offering to open the corresponding data source that I used last time. Sure, why not? I'm going to hit yes, and it automatically opened the spreadsheet. I didn't have to retrieve it. However, let's take a look at the data before we actually proceed. So notice we have from, to, date, type of call, and direction of call. We are going to use the where clause in conjunction with the direction, but not yet. So, what do we have here? We have column A, the from phone number, placing a phone call to column B, the to phone number. Now notice these lines are behind. So that's for, easier reading. However, you can bring the lines to the front if you want to see it. So you just use this little tool up here and send them all to the back, whatever way you want to do. So again, I opened a saved map. I didn't have to redraw it. It saved me a lot of time. So I can use this over and over again. However, I want you to notice, under relationship type, I chose a relationship type out of my generic list. There's nothing wrong with this. It'll work absolutely fine, work perfectly. However, Sentinel Visualizer offers a very powerful feature. Notice the type of call in column D, the type. I can, on the fly, connect a column to relationship type. Instead of using that generic relationship, I get a more granular relationship type. On the fly, Sentinel Visualizer will import these values as the name of the relationship so that I can filter by voice, filter by text. Maybe in a more realistic environment, you have financial transactions. And so you might want to filter by check or cash or bank transfer or something. So instead of having a generic sent money to, you're at a more granular level. So I, again, just like I connected the dots here, I connected the type to my relationship. All right. At this point, we're going to hit import. So again, notice it makes another checkpoint, and we give you a default name and date and time. However, I'm going to change the description. I'm going to say after the phone owner's import and prior to call records, so that if I make a mistake, if I have to go back in time, I know which checkpoint that I want to use. Okay, we'll hit OK. Again, it's a very small set of data. It took only a moment. I'm going to hit my home. I'm going to go back to all data to Visualizer. And now I'm going to redraw this. By the way, again, let me show you. Remember how I hand drew those bank accounts? Well, that was just a test, and I didn't want to mix it with this. So if I drag my mouse over that and I hit my delete key, it's removing it only from the visualizer, not the database. So I'm removing it from the chart, but it remains in the database. That's not what I want to do. Instead, what I want to do is go up here to remove, and I actually want to remove it from the database permanently, just because it's kind of interfering with my demo. So I'm going to delete this from the database, and it confirms I hit yes, and then it asks again because it's permanent and it really wants to make sure that you really want to delete it from the database because it cannot be recovered unless, of course, you restore from your checkpoint. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit yes, and we'll get rid of that now. In this case, I'm going to redraw hierarchical. And this is a combination of two spreadsheets. Again, remember, my first spreadsheet showed me only the people and the phones. When I added the call records, now it showed me the connections between the phone numbers and the people themselves. So for example, now I know if I highlight Ed and I control click Jane, in other words, two entities are highlighted, I can then go over to my links tab and click shortest path. And again, it's a declutter tool. It gets rid of the noise and lets me hone in on the data I want. So there's my filter button. I can toggle between my filter button. I can also change colors, of course. And I can go back to turn off my shortest path. You'll also, so now, let's go back, and I just realized actually, I forgot to mention date. So we connected the date. If you remember, column C was the date. If you remember, I opened an existing map. So it was already there. I didn't have to draw it. And so, sorry, I forgot to talk about it. But we attached the date, the column C date, to the relationship type. We didn't attach the date to the phone number. It wasn't the date that the phone was manufactured. It was the date of the event of the relationship. So we connected the date to both start and end because, again, it was not a perpetual phone call. It started and ended on the same date. So we connected that same row to both start and end date. So now I can use my time range tool. So I'm going to drag this slider all the way to the left, and I'm going to enable my filter, my time range tool. So notice when I enabled this, a lot of the relationships disappeared because my dates are down here, or up here, July 2nd. There are no connections within that date. So I'm going to go back to my Entities tab. I want to see only linked entities. So I can show all entities, linked entities, or the mirror image, unlinked entities. But I'm interested only in linked entities. Now, as I scroll my slider, my network grows over time. I can also scroll just a window of time, a certain day, week, month, hour, 12 hours, whatever your time period is. I can slide that window and just see what's going on in that time period. Nothing there and right there. And then I can turn off the time range tool. So because we brought the dates in, we were able to use our time range tool. All right. Now, let's go back and add to our database. Notice address. We brought in as, well, we didn't even bring it in as metadata against the person. Let's say we want to bring address in. We could bring it in as metadata. In other words, we don't necessarily want to see it on the screen. We just want to know where they live in case we need to access it. So we're going to attach address, and we're going to tell the system this is an address, and we're going to import the data. And now we're going to look at all data. Again, that's not the only way to retrieve data. In fact, while I'm on this, if you, let's just say you're looking at John Smith or Edward Sims or anything like that, you can open up a new visualizer, go to entities and add. So this is where you can search your entire database for a phone number, a document, a latitude and longitude, anything. And so you can search by name, anything you want. But you can just say, well, I just want to search for Ed, let's just say. And so I find him, and then I get an entity there. I can either hit the plus sign, I can right click, and I can do all of those things. My point is, you don't always have to go back to all data to visualizer. You can just open a new visualizer and retrieve your data from within this tab. Okay. Plus, you also have your entity search and relationship search. Okay. My main point, though, is if we drill down to Sally Prescott, for example, and I go to metadata, we can now see where they live and the title. If you remember, I brought the title in, I brought the title in as the metadata over here. And then I brought the address in. So now that I drilled down to her account, I can see under metadata where she lives. But I might want to bring the address in to the chart, because maybe I do want to see where they live on the chart. In other words, it has to be an entity. So now I'm going to go back to this chart, and I'm going to add another entity, a third entity, and I like to go across, and I'm going to attach address over here, and then I have to tell Sentinel Visualizer that this is an address. And again, I like to put the column, so this is column D. That's just the way I do it. It's your data, your database. You can put whatever you want up here. But now we have to connect. Well, we don't have to. We could bring addresses in as standalone, but I want to connect address to the person. So I want to create a relationship. And now I want to attach the person, and we'll say resides at this address. And so this is my C to D relationship. And I'll zoom in a little bit so that we can see that a little. So I'm connecting the owner to the address and calling the relationship resides at, just like I had owner to phone and calling the relationship owns phone. All right, we'll go ahead and import. It will not create a duplicate of the person. And now when we go and we do all data to visualizer, and now we're going to redraw, notice we can now see where the person lives right here and which phone they own. And there you go. All right. Now, we're going to review how to bring in data with different directions. So notice the way the arrow is pointing. But if you'll notice, my call records actually had a direction. So this is how this works. So two things. In this instance of Sentinel Visualizer, I am in a database called Database 1. Just like you can have multiple Word docs open, just like you could have multiple spreadsheets open, you can have multiple databases open. So I'm going to right-click on my Sentinel Visualizer icon in my tray, in my taskbar. I'm going to launch a second instance of Sentinel Visualizer. In this instance, I'm going to create a database called, I forgot what the other one was called, Database 1, okay? In this one, I'm going to call it Database 2. It's creating a Microsoft SQL Server database on my computer. And when I hit OK, notice I'm in Database 2. And again, notice I'm grayed out here. There's no data in here. I just created it. But notice when I rest my cursor, on the left side is Database 1. And on the right side is Database 2. So just like you could have multiple Word docs open, you could have multiple databases open. All right, in this database, we're going to import the data a little bit differently. And again, I'm going to go to the new because I want to show you how to do it. I'm going to open my call records. And the whole point here is to use this where clause based on the direction of the call. So again, my whole intent is to make sure that the arrow, the direction of the arrow, points the way I want it to. Because in this database, my relationship, where's my call records here? My relationship was all from all A to B, every call. I did not filter out my calls. Okay, so now I'm going to use the where clause to filter out my calls, my column. So notice, if it's a text column, you use apostrophe. If it's a numeric column, you don't use any delimiter. And if it's a date column, you use hashtags. We're going to use my where clause, where direction equals, and I need a delimiter. That's what I forgot before, outgoing, and a delimiter. Hit the arrow, and notice it filtered out the incoming. Again, I'll do that again. I'm going to take this out. So we have a mixture of incoming and outgoing. So we have where direction equals, and again, I need my delimiter, and we'll say outgoing. And now I'm going to import only the outgoing calls so that when I add an entity, and we'll just do it real quick here. We got from, phone number, we got to, phone number, we'll add the relationship, we have, again, it's the direction of the arrow, so I want from and to. Since it's an outgoing call, again, I can use the type if I want. I can also use the direction, and maybe in this example, let's use the direction. just for the heck of it. I can still add metadata. I can put direction here. In fact, maybe that's a little bit more interesting. Let's maintain the type and let's add metadata of the direction. Again, you can do it lots of different ways. I don't necessarily have a direction. See, I don't have a direction metadata. We'll come back to that. I'll just use as a temporary spaceholder type, just as a spaceholder. So instead, we can mix and match any kinds of ways. My main point was that I used the where clause. So let's go ahead and import. Again, it's making a backup. This time, though, it imported only some of the calls. And we'll do hierarchical. And so here we have the direction of which way it's going. Now let's go back. We'll edit the source data. We'll just change this to incoming. Filter this. Now we have incoming. Now, this is where we're going to bring the lines to the front. So I'm going to go up here, bring all to the front, and I'm going to delete these connector lines. I'm going to highlight it with my arrow and hit delete. Now it's going to be from column B to column A. In other words, it's going to point the other direction. It's going to point to the from, because incoming, if A is our target, it's all incoming to column A. So we'll import. Again, we're going to back up in case I made a mistake, and I might say after outgoing, but prior to incoming. Something like that. We'll hit OK. It imports the data, and now let's take a look. And now it's a different chart because we have bidirectional. See this? 2155 and 4700. So let's do that. This is another feature. So we have 47. I can highlight this. I'm going to highlight 2155 and highlight 4700. I'm going to highlight selected only because I want to illustrate something. I could have highlighted selected and connected. If I want to output this to a new visualizer, it opens a new visualizer and takes that subset. But in this case, I want to choose selected only, output it to a new visualizer. So if you have two entities and you're interested in how they're connected, put them on the visualizer, highlight them, you go to get links between selected, and you have these choices. I want to know the least number of entities to connect every pair, or I want to limit it at X number of jumps, or I want only direct connections, which is what I'm going to choose. And it shows the relationships. One, the voice, if I hit details down here, the voice call is from 4700 to 2155. The relationships are from entity 1 to 4700, and if I change my line to curved, it shows each direction like that. And as I highlight each one, we can see which direction they go and how many each way. All right, so that was an illustration of how to take two sets of data and import it on top of each other to find new connections between the charts. I hope you learned something. Thanks for your time.